All right, so let's jump into our next topic. So let's talk about changes we can make associated with the user interface via our profiles. Okay? All right, so the things that we are talking about up until now have really been associated with security, the profiles driving security rules that we have. Now what we're going to talk about is simply customizing the user interface. This is not security stuff. So I want to be clear that the things that we talk about here are customizing the user interface. Hiding a tab is not protecting data. Okay? A tab is just one mechanism by which a user can get access to record data. There are other ways. So these are all simply customizing the user experience. All right? So what we're going to do in the case of universal containers is we've decided to customize the layout, the page layouts of our positions for different profiles. And we're going to also do some customizations associated with apps and tabs in terms of what our users are able to see. Okay? So the other thing that we're going to utilize and introduce here are record types. Record types are sort of an advanced feature that allow us to drive a page layout or determine a page layout based on decorating our record with some metadata. All right, so let's jump into record types. What record types do, they do two things. Record types can determine which page layout is displayed for a specific record or is utilized for a record. And it can also limit pick list, the available pick list items associated with a record. Okay? So the first image we have up there, so it says technical record type and non-technical record type. And then on the vertical column, we have hiring manager and recruiter. Well, those are two profiles, right? So for the hiring manager profile, if it is a technical record type, we could determine that we utilize or display page layout A, or the blue one. If it's non-technical, then we want to use the green one. Okay? Otherwise, in the case of a recruiter, there's a third page layout that we want to utilize, and that, regardless of what record type it is, we want to use the record layout C. Okay? So the record type determines which page layout we display. Now, the record type is a field on the record. It's a standard field on a record. Now, you don't see it in your object definition until you create a record type. Otherwise, it's missing from the list of standard fields. So by doing this exercise and enabling record types, we're now going to see another field on our positions, in our case, called record type. Let me show you where that is. So within my objects, in my position, let me point out that down here I enabled record types by creating a bunch of record types. So here are my record types, and then here are my page layouts. Now by creating some record types, what happens is that there is now a new standard field available on my position records called record type. That can be set to one of three things. It can be, in my case, it can be set to approved technical position record type, non-technical position, and technical position. Okay? So that would be the value. Think of it almost, it's a pick list almost. A pick list of all the available options that I have listed here. Okay? So jumping back to our slide, let's take a look at what this does. So like I said, we're going to be able to, by looking at the record and identifying, is this a technical or a non-technical position? Let's now display this particular page layout. In addition, the second thing is we can dynamically limit the available options in pick lists based on the record type. Now in our case, what we're going to end up doing is the department field is a pick list. And our rule is that if it is a technical position, then it's in the engineering or IT departments. If it's a non-technical position, then it's in the finance, support, or sales departments, all right? Now, you don't have to do this. This is an optional thing. You can very well have technical positions in sales. You can have technical positions in finance or support, whatever it may be, right? But this is something that we're going to do in our case and something that's available to you, okay? The primary purpose of these is to determine which page layout to display based on two things. What's the profile of the user looking at the data? Really, who's the actor? What kind of actor are they? And then two, what did we identify? What type of record is this? What is the type of the record? Okay.
But this field is a regular field that is updated by the user, right?
Yep. So if we take a look at a position, so it's another piece of data on our records, and notice that here record type non-technical position. Okay.
So in the beginning there is no record type for this record. So which page layout is seen then?
Great question. So let's take a look at some other object type, okay? So the question is, well, what happens before I create a record type and I enable this? What's the behavior before? Well, in the case of candidates, let's see if I have any. I don't have any record types, right?
No, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about data. But when you first create a candidate, for example.
Oh, we did not specify.
You didn't specify yet?
So the question is, what happens when my record does not have any, the record type field is empty. It's not set to anything.
It's a new record, so you don't have anything in it.
Okay, and so it wasn't set up. All right, I'll come back to that when we talk about assignment. So, but that is another option that's available. So let's try and come up with some sort of business scenario where this would make sense. So one of them would be technical positions and non-technical positions. Now, if we had two different types of positions, we could approach this in a couple of ways. One, we could create two different custom objects, right? We could say, all right, let's have a technical position object and let's have a non-technical position object, and then they would have many fields in common, but then the technical would have a few fields that the non-technical does not, but maybe vice versa. That would be one way to approach it. Another way to approach it would be to only have a position, but maybe it's just the same layout, and people are just supposed to know, okay, these technical fields here, they only apply to technical positions, and the non-technical fields, they only apply to non-technical positions, okay? So we could approach it from the standpoint of expecting our users to know what fields to ignore and which ones to actually fill out. Now, what record types allow us to do is by determining which page layout is displayed, we're able to maintain just a single definition of a custom object, but we can then customize the user experience in different types of situations, okay? Maybe you have something where you have multiple, this also applies to something like a standard object like case. So maybe you have, if you think about Salesforce.com, let's say one of you calls developer support. Well, what's the kind of information that's relevant to developer support? It's a whole bunch of setup menu stuff, licensing, all types of stuff go into that, right? Now let's say that you're a sales rep using Salesforce, and you're calling in because you're having a problem with some function in the application. Well, the support rep who talks to you, what type of information are they going to collect? Well, they're going to be saying, okay, you can't edit this lead, or some problem is happening when you're okay, well, what were you doing in the app from an application or a business standpoint? So they're collecting some other set of data. Now, both of these are cases, okay? But we could have, maybe 50 common fields, and then a bunch of fields that are unique to developers, and then a bunch of fields that are unique to developers, but customize that user experience based on what type of case this is. Okay? All right. All right. What it is not, and we want to be clear about this for developers, it's not a form of subclassing. So technical position does not extend position. Okay, so it's not object-oriented type stuff going on here. This is just a UI thing. At the end of the day, this just does UI changes. All right? All right. How do you set the record type? Well, if it's a new record, you'll be prompted to select a record type upon creation. If it's an existing record, there'll be a change link next to, much like the owner, you can click on change and then select a different record type, so you can edit it that way. As a developer, you can also control what available record types a user sees on a profile-by-profile basis. So you could specify that people with a certain profile can never change. Let's say someone who only does developer support, they never have the ability to set a record to be a, business call or business type case or whatever it may be. Okay, so you can control what are the available options through that profile record type settings. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, and then Murat, I'll come around back to your question. All right, so in a profile, so what I've done is you can create a record type. Let me create a record type just for fun. So if I go into create objects and then I select position, I can scroll down to my record types and I can identify a new record type. Okay, so I can say here are my existing record types. Oh, this is the, I'm sorry, so the existing record type is, do you want to copy over any of the settings associated with another record type? And what this is referring to is the list of available pick lists, or limiting the pick list items, and we'll come back to that. So I'm going to create one based on the non-technical position, all right? And so what this will be is we'll call this approved non-technical position. Okay. And so I'm creating a new record type. I can activate it. And then what I can do, this enable for profile, what this is referring to is that users who have these profiles, they'll be able to set records equal to approved non-technical position. This will be available to them from the pick list of options. Okay. So I could go in here and do this like so. We can also make it the default. The user can also actually go into their account and set up some defaults on their own. So, all right. The second thing that we set up here is, all right, when I'm creating my record type, which page layout, so for my approved non-technical positions, which page layout do you want me to display on either on a universal basis or on a per profile basis? So I could say if this person is a hiring manager, then I want to use the position layout. But if the person is a sysadmin, I want to use the approved technical position layout. even though I'm using the same naming conventions here with technical position record type and technical position layout, there's no binding between these two. They're independent of each other, so I can mix and match all I want. Okay? But once again, this gets back to that matrix. Based on your profile of the user and the record type on the record, which page layout do you want me to display? Okay. All right, so I'm going to click on Save here. Okay. And so now I've created this record type, and I've set up the settings for which page layout is displayed. Now there's an additional thing that I can do here, and the additional thing that I can do with record types is to limit the available pick list items. So I could go into the, for instance, the department, and this one, because I copied it over from the non-technical position, this one was already taken care of for me. But let me do one from scratch and go, okay, priority, the only thing that a user could set the priority to be if it's already approved is, let's get rid of these two, critical, and so let's say if it's been approved, it's only medium or low or something like that. So in other words, when a user is editing this record, there's only going to be 2 pick list items that appear that they can change it to, medium and low, the ones that I selected. Okay? All right. All right. Okay, so now what this would do is this would drive the page layout. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to do is after you've created your record types, you're going to want to go back and edit these to change the assignments. So you might have some new rules that pop up. So if I go back here to Profiles and I click on, really, it doesn't matter, any profile, notice that under Page Layouts, there's this View Assignment. Now if I don't have record types set up for a specific object, the view assignment, there's only one record type, and that's the default record type. Okay? So the page layout that's utilized, I could have multiple page layouts, but it's a determination that will be based simply on the profile, not based on the record type, because I haven't created any record types. Now the view is much more different if I edit the assignments for a position, because with the position, remember I had 4 record types. Now notice here, what I'm able to do is for each profile and for each record type, which page layout do I want to utilize? Okay. Now there's also a column that's called master. And that gets back to Murat's question, which is, master is essentially none. In other words, if this field is null, if it hasn't been set, well, what page layout do you want me to display? Okay. So that's what master is. But what I have here, approved non-technical, approved technical, non-technical, and technical. This matrix determines which page layout I utilize. So if we take a look at a position here, so let me actually go back. So I am a system administrator, and it looks like a lot of these are technical positions. So if I go back to a position, I click on a position. If it's a non-technical position, that then determines what page layout I see in the custom look in UI. Okay? All right, there's one last thing I want to show you, and what that is that in the setup menu, notice here I can change the record type by clicking on the change link. And in my case, I only have approved non-technical and non-technical position available. The reason that I only have 2 available ones is because in my profile settings, so if I go down to my profile and I edit, in my case I'm a system administrator. There are record type settings. And see how for positions, the only two record types that I have enabled are the two non-technical ones. I'm sorry, what was it? Yeah, approved. What do I have? Oh, the selected ones that are available were approved non-technical and non-technical. So the ones that I have available when I'm editing the record are based on what I set up here. All right.
So when you create a new one, the master record type is going to be ineffective. Then you will go and change the type during the data entry.
Okay, so the question is when you create. So let's say you have a bunch of data.
Yeah, I want to see how it works. So first you have to create a new data.
Yeah.
And then you are going to change the record type. And for example, the pick list will have a limited options.
Yeah.
Then you are going to select one of them.
Yeah.
You are going to save it, and then you are going to change the record type again, for example.
Yeah.
Then what happens? Then the layout changes after you save it. And then what happens to the pick list if this value that is in the record is not one of the ones that are allowed for this record type?
Yeah.
So is there a validation about this or?
No. Okay, so the question is, I think the question is, well, what if, so we limit the list of available pick list items, and what if I go into a record and I, like here, I'll just show this to you actually. So in this case, this is a non-technical position. The department is equal to sales. I actually need to enable technical so that I can actually demo this. So one second while I enable that. Within my sysadmin, so record type settings, I'm going to enable technical position. So the difference between technical position and non-technical is that, remember, technical is department is engineering and IT. In other words, what we see here. This is actually the most effective way to show it. All right, so if it's technical, I'm going to have engineering and IT available. If it's department, I'm going to have finance, support, and sales. So if I click on a position, and here it's set to sales, well, what if I change this now to technical position? Okay. It's going to allow me to do that. All that's doing is going to change. I've updated the record so that now it's a technical position, but the data on the record for the department pick list is still set equal to sales. It doesn't change. There's nothing about this that says these are the only allowable values. It's the list of available values. So now when I do the drop-down list, notice that it says sales only because sales is what it's currently set to. It does not display finance or support because the record type says don't show those as available. It does show engineering and IT because the record type says those are the two to display. So if the data is currently set to something, it will still currently be set to that. And I can go in, I can go and save that. I don't have to necessarily change it. So it's not, like I said, you have to keep staying in the mode. This is a UI thing. It controls the UI. It does not control the data model. Okay, it doesn't change business rules about validating, allowable pick list values for your pick list. Okay.
Can you create a new one, a new position?
Can I create a new position? Yes. So the question is, so if I create a new position,
it will ask at first which, okay.
Exactly.
That was the thing I was thinking about. So.
Okay, yeah. So when you create a new position, it will prompt you, all right, before you create this, tell me what it is. And then that will determine the page layout that would be utilized for editing that record. Okay. So in my case, I don't think I've set this up actually, but yeah, let me change this quickly. So if I'm a system administrator, and what I'll do is I'll set this up so that if it's a non-technical position, then I want to utilize so if it's approved non-technical, utilize, let's see here, technical should be technical, and then over here we have, so technical is set to technical. Where's non, oh, there's non-technical. So this is the one that needs to be updated. So non-technical needs to be a regular old position layout. All right. So my purpose in updating this is so that now when I create a new position and I go, okay, I want to do a non-technical position. So if I do a non-technical position, I don't have the operating system or programming languages fields available because that's what my page layouts do. Now, if I were to create a new position and select technical position record type, now notice that I do have the programming languages and operating system fields available. So in this case, the reason that this is because I have two different page layouts. One that displays the technical skills, the other one that doesn't, okay? And the record type drove or determined which of those layouts to display, and also my profile, okay? Let's do some lab exercises. All right, so what you're gonna do is in the lab exercises, you're gonna create some record types. Let's just do a bunch of lab exercise time. In fact, what we'll do is we'll also schedule in a short break here. You're going to create your record types. You're also going to customize some page layouts so that we're going to display the technical information in one case and not display it in another. Okay? And so let's do this. Let's work on exercise 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7. And let's spend some time creating record types and page layouts, and then you can experiment with sort of driving that condition to change the UI based on two things, the profile and the record type. Okay? So 2.5, 2.6, 2.7.
Question, how, I'm trying to think how to say this. How would you make it so that you can keep the user from changing the record type? So say you want a particular flow, so you want to enforce it. You don't want them to have to choose and maybe see a field they shouldn't see.
Well,
is that like a
there's
profile?
so do you want, so every time, so the question is, how do you control that?
Yeah, because it says here that the user can override, right? They can choose which record type they want in the profile. But suppose you don't want the technical positions to be seen by non-technical, and you want to enforce that.
Oh, so you want, okay, so...
Or you just create another page layout.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is, can you control that a user, when a user creates a record, that maybe they always create it with one record type? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, then in that case,
based on the pick list or whatever.
Yeah. So associated with the profile, under your record type settings, just enable 1, and then have that be, that's your default, so that when that user logs in, that's, I don't even think it prompts them when there's only 1. I think it just goes straight through, where that's always what they're...
based on a particular value, though. That they come up based on
so
the
have it
technical
be,
versus non-technical. So that is dynamic. You don't know in advance what.
No, because we haven't even created the record yet. So the question is, like, can I have it be dynamic? But the answer is no, because we don't even know what we're even doing yet. So this is the dynamic thing that then determines what's going to happen. So this is kind of the point where the user makes the choice, if you want to give them the choice, where then it drives the layout. Okay. So there's a large number of questions, and I think I left off Chris. Did you do the last question? Yep. Is that right? He's going to say yes. So, Anu? Anu, then it is your turn. So let's go through. We have 3 pages of review questions, so definitely get your money's worth here. What are the different types of licenses that are available? So what were those 2 main types?
The CRM and the platform access.
Exactly. So there's okay, go ahead.
For the Salesforce, and there is something called Salesforce platform as well.
Yeah.
If you have CRM access, you would by default get the platform access as well.
Very good. So there are 2 main different types of licenses. There are many others at different levels, but there are the Salesforce.com, which are really the CRM-oriented licenses, and then there are the platform or the Force.com licenses. The CRM ones have access to campaigns, leads, cases, solutions, all that CRM stuff. The platform, you have to create your own custom objects in order to do whatever you need to do. All right. Chris, what do profiles control? And what I'm looking for are 3 categories of types of things that profiles control.
Tab settings.
Tab settings are an example of what?
What tabs they're.
I'm looking for presentation or user interface. So the first thing would be it controls the user interface elements, which applications a user sees, which tabs a user sees, record types, page layouts, right?
Yeah. And then security around login times and IP addresses and stuff like that.
Okay. And the security stuff, we actually split into 2 different sections or 2 different areas. Do you remember what the term we used? There was the list of checkboxes, the 2 columns of checkboxes. Those are called
Permission?
Permissions. Very good. Permissions. So the permissions were our administrative permissions and the general user permissions. And then you were getting at security stuff. So field level security, that's access to data. You also mentioned IP addresses, hours, and then also object level CRUD. Remember we had the create, read, update, delete associated with our profiles. Okay? All right. Very good. All right. What are the permissions that allow a system administrator to manage the application? Leah, why don't we'll throw a question your way. So, what were some of those?
What are the permissions? Let me. Can you repeat the question?
Leah, what are the permissions that allow a system administrator to manage the application?
View all data, modify all data, and
Very good.
customize application.
Very good. So customize application, setup menu stuff. There's also a view permission associated with that, view setup and configuration, but customize is the ability to go in and customize, create, all that kind of stuff there. And then you mentioned modify all data, which is a data-oriented or a application data-oriented permission to modify all data. All right, very good. Raj, true or false? System administrators can customize the permissions of both standard and custom profiles.
So false, you can only customize custom profiles?
Very good. So the answer is false. System administrators can only customize the permissions of custom profiles, not of the standard ones, the out-of-the-box ones. Now that being said, you can always create a copy, right, of the standard one, and or clone it, I should say. True or false? When creating a new profile, it's possible to copy over settings from an existing profile. So, Talon.
True.
True.
Cool.
In fact,
Okay.
it's required. So when you create a new profile, you're always cloning it, and you're always basing it on a previous profile. Okay.
In fact, it's false because it's mandatory to copy over setting. It's not possible, but
Sorry?
it's not possible. It's mandatory. So
Okay.
in terms of
Yeah.
linguistics, it's false.
Murat, if you remove access from an app from a profile, will users in that profile still be able to see the tabs included in that application?
If they are included in other applications, yes, they can. But
Very
if,
good.
if they cannot, if those tabs are not in other applications, then they will not.
Yeah, very good. So if those tabs, like for instance accounts or contacts, are common ones to use in multiple applications, if they're available in other applications, then they'll see those. Okay, very good. Lyra, if you hide a tab from a profile, will users in that profile be able to see records for that object?
I'm not sure, but I think yes.
You
I
think
mean,
yes. You think
'cause-
correct.
Because tab, you're just hiding it, but there's another way to view the record.
Very good. So the answer is yes, you will be able to see records for that object. Can anyone tell me how might be a way that you would be able to view a record without
Type in the URL,
type in the URL?
if you know the
Well,
URL.
yeah, okay. But how? So yeah, if your users were smart enough to know the record ID, they could do salesforce.com/ and then type in the record ID. So that would be a way to access that record, but let's assume they're not that smart. So
You have a related list of things, so you can just click from there and go.
very good. So if it's related to something else, and it appears in our related list. So remember that when, let's say I hide the reviews tab, but then I edit or I take a look at a job application. There's a related list of reviews, and then I click on the review. So we're not going to have a tab. It's not going to have whatever color we would have associated with that, but we're editing the same data. It's using the same page layout. What's another way, another common way to get at data, see record data without going through a page layout?
Just click on the link within a record.
Uh-huh.
That's
If it's doing the opposite direction,
Right.
going up a little. Okay, you could do that. But what about if we're not using a page layout? What's a feature in Salesforce?
API call be a way.
API call, very good. API calls, we could get data. Reporting, exactly. So reporting is a facility in which we can display data of our records in a report and view that data. So, all right.
Follow-up question to that.
Mhm.
There's a arrow after the last tab. If you click on that, does it show even the hidden tabs or only the available tabs?
It's going to show default on and default off, but if it's tab hidden, it won't show up. And I'm 90% sure of that, so I am going to test that out. My memory gets a little hazy with some of this stuff. So let's see here, profiles. So here I'm a system administrator, and what I could do is, so let me see if I have, okay, tab hidden portals, that's not a good one. Candidate references is hidden. So here's a custom object called candidate references. If I edit one of my applications, and let me see here, where's an application? Here we go. And I say, I'm currently in recruiting. So if I edit the recruiting application and I say that the recruiting application will contain candidate references, okay. Now for me, notice that it did not show up in my list of tabs because it's hidden. And I believe it will not show up here, but let me verify. It does not show up in the list of available tabs. Now, if I had default off, I would be able to see it in this list. In fact, I could come in here as a user and customize my tabs. So if there's certain objects I never look at, never edit, your end users can, go in and make some customizations like that. But if it's hidden, we're not going to show it in either situation. Okay. So they would need to go through related lists or other means to find that. So. If you have two record types for an object, do you need to have two page layouts for that object? Mauricio.
Yes, so you can display in one layout the proper information of the master for the technical, and another one for the info that you want to hide.
Well, it's the answer is going to be no to this one because it's something that you would commonly do. The primary purpose of record types is to determine which page layout to use, but it's not necessary. Can anyone think of a purpose? Pick list. So I might create two different record types simply for the purpose of limiting my pick list options, and then only have one page layout that both of those record types are then utilizing. Are you going to do that? Probably not, but the point is that from a technical standpoint, it's not required, okay? Yeah. If a user doesn't have access to a specific record type, will they be able to see the records that have that record type? So Roger.
Well, record type is not database record type, so I would say yes. It would just be under their default record type or page layout.
Yeah. So when we're setting up the record type settings in the profile, what we're setting up there are the available record types that we can change or set a record to be. That in no way is it's not a security setting saying you can or cannot see these record types. It's what can you change the value of that field to be, okay, or set it to be if we're creating a new record, okay. Yeah, so yes, you will see it. And remember that our matrix, regardless of whether we can set it, we assign page layouts in every single situation. Right? John, you get the next question. True or false, a field hidden by field level security is still visible through the API?
I would say yes. True.
Or. So that one is false. So if you protect it with field level security, that applies in however you're accessing that. Okay.
So this is the database level field security.
Well, there's only one type of field level security. That's we set up field level security associated with our profiles, okay, and it's a security setting associated with objects and in specific.
I thought the profiles and page layout was only the UI layer.
Well, this has nothing to do with profiles, though. So there's in a profile, you can set up the field level security to either restrict visibility or to restrict the ability to edit it, to edit a particular field. Now, also in a profile, you can specify which page layout is utilized, but a page layout also has the ability to either hide or, set to read only fields. But that only applies to that page layout. So in one case, field level security, it's really data model oriented. It's something that's applied there. In the case of a page layout, it's UI oriented and it only applies to the UI. So if this question was a field hidden by a page layout is still visible through the API, the answer is true. It would be because a page layout does not affect the web services API. But if it's field level security, it's at the data model. So regardless of the mechanism that I'm using to access that, it's protected.
So if you go via like web service, you won't be able to access it?
Yeah, so because when you utilize our web services API, first thing you have to do is log into Salesforce. So there's a login call that you need to perform. So it knows who you are. So let's say I do a what we call a SOQL query, which is like SQL, but it's Salesforce Object Query Language, but you do a select. So let's say we do a select and we select that field. We're not going to get anything, if it's not visible to us, we're not going to get anything back for that field as a part of that query. Okay?
Yeah, that makes sense, because since the API is controlled by a logging user,
Yeah.
it's logical that the user security, which hidden fields, field level security is part of that.
Yeah.
That you'd be able to control that. So,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Is that,
Still
no?
confused.
Okay.
I understand the login and that you want to have the
Uh-huh.
same kind of data access capability throughout the application,
Yep.
throughout the platform. But you did imply somehow that through the API you could gain access. So what is that?
Apex. Okay, so now if we're executing Apex code runs, there's different security settings we can do with Apex code, but it runs in a system level sort of setting, and what that means is you will have the ability to, for instance, modify, or if you wanted to, return it and display it, you could in Apex code do that. So when you're running your Apex code, it does not take into account object level CRUD or field level security. So that's Apex. That is different from what we refer to as the API. And I don't really like this, because when I think API, I don't think necessarily that that's web services, but for Salesforce, they use the term API frequently, and what that means is specifically web services API, okay? And so when I'm using the web services API, then it does take into account the default security, but Apex code by default runs in that system mode, and therefore it does have access to that.
And I think you also mentioned certain triggers that run in a system context too, or
Yeah.
workflow executions, or
So workflow also does that. So let's say that we create a workflow rule, and we want to update a field that is, according to field level security, not modifiable. Okay? We can do that with a workflow rule using a field update. Okay? So workflow rules do not take into account field level security. So let me give you an example. So I give you that checking account example. Well, let me give you another example. Tomorrow we're going to talk about approval processes. And on a position, we're going to have a status, okay? And if I take a look at a position here, oops, I didn't mean to do that. And one of the things that we're going to do tomorrow is notice that there's this substatus here, pending and approved. Well, we're going to create an approval process tomorrow, and the purpose of the approval process is to set this field equal to a substatus of approved, okay? So we're going to go through this approval process. 3 people are going to sign off on it, and then ultimately the net effect is that we're going to update this. We're going to do a field update using what equivalently, it's a workflow action to update this substatus to be approved. Well, instead of submitting this for approval and going through the process, heck, why don't I just edit this record and set it to approved, and woohoo, now I don't need to have my boss approve this position. Now the recruiter is going to go out and start recruiting for this position, because when they run their report and they go, okay, what are the approved positions? Well, here's a new one called account executive, so I need to start recruiting for it. They completely bypass security. So what would be a solution for this? A solution for that, to prevent the user from manually modifying the substatus field, is to protect it with field level security. So make the substatus viewable by the user but read only. So that when the user, I'll just enable this really quickly. So when the user goes out and views the, I need to hit cancel here. And if I take a look at field level security and specifically the sub status field, so for Phil Katz, the hiring manager, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set sub status to read only. So now, when I log in as Phil, and Phil goes out and attempts to edit that position, and now Phil goes, all right, I know what I'm going to do. Instead of sending this through the approval process, I'm just going to change the status to be approved. Well, look at that. Field level security. It's read only. Phil can't change that. Okay? What we want to force Phil to do is to go through the approval process. The approval process will execute a workflow action to update the record. It will not take into account field level security. We are forcing Phil to go through our mechanism in order to update the sub status. Okay? If field level security kicked in on my field update, then no one could ever change it, you know? Apex, workflow actions, those are two things. There might be more, but you know, things that where you, the application developer, are controlling, you know, the mechanism by which the record is being updated. Okay.
So we can say that workflow and Apex will never do the actions with a standard login procedure. They are just above the login procedure then. So Apex, for example,
well, it's not above. It's because you can do things where it takes into account. I mean, with Apex, you can take. I don't want to oversimplify this. There's much more in Apex that is configurable in terms of what you can do, and so I don't want to oversimplify it because you can do restrictions, but. These are two examples of things where you have logic that can do something that ignores, it does not take into account the user's field level security settings. So, okay. Yeah.
So you can think of field level protection as, let's say, human protection.
Mm-hmm.
So humans cannot do anything to it, but with the Apex and something
okay. Yeah. So it's using the application, the Force.com application facilities, and by that I mean the ability to view and edit data by the end user. It's protecting the end user from using those default mechanisms. It is not preventing you, the developer, from creating the logic that ultimately needs to be performed to do what you want to do. Okay? Okay, so, yeah, notice that I have inline editing. Notice it has the pencil here. This one has the lock, and that's because of field level security. So I can double click and edit that one, but I can't double click and edit this one. All right. So John, was that yours? Well, you really got me on a segue there, on a tangent. Not a segue, a tangent. All right. All right, so when should you use field level security? Kevin?
We just talk a lot about it, but...
oh, you're just going to say ditto?
Exactly. Exactly. No, I think when you want to control the visibility of a specific field or the ability to edit a field, so
yeah.
Confidential data
yeah.
Is probably a good example. Social security number is one you gave, or
yeah.
Bank account information, things like
that. Yeah, okay. So, when you want to prevent users from directly accessing either by viewing or editing specific fields, you can do that using field level security. Okay? Yeah. All right, Carol. when should you use record types?
When you have people who have different profiles who want to see two different things, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to access two different information,
Yeah.
like lists or other fields, then
Okay.
you create two different records type.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. So different views, depending on two things, different types of data, which is what the record type is identifying for us, and then two different profiles, or different profiles, so who the person is. So, Leah, what was my sentence I told you?
Which one?
The one about I tried to distill record types into one sentence last week.
Oh God, I was having a brain freeze on trying to distinguish between record types. I can't remember what you said, but I do remember the thing that made it click for me was the one that I told you Jay said.
Oh, great. What someone else told you.
But it was in combination with everything else you told me.
I'm sure I laid all the groundwork. Yeah, I laid all the groundwork.
It just came in, you know.
All right. That's, I learned my lesson with calling on you. All right. So, Chris, when should you use page layouts?
When you want to make different views available of the objects to different profiles for
Yeah.
users.
So record types and page layouts, they work in conjunction with each other, but ultimately what determines which fields you see and the layout and all that kind of stuff is page layouts. Okay, what's this?
What you see, page layouts, depends on what it is, record type, and who you are, profile.
There we go.
That was it.
And that didn't help.
I just remembered to recite it. And I'm
Yeah,
going to learn how to do
my-
it in Turkish after.
I was trying to distill record types down to one sentence, and it was, you know, what you see, in other words, the page layouts, is based on what it is, in other words, the record type, and who you are, what profile you've been assigned. Okay? All right. Good memory.
One question about it's a general question. In fact, we can write expressions during validations, things like that. But in terms of visibility and editability, only thing we can do is with the profiles, as far as I understand now. So we cannot write expressions on editability or visibilities. We have it's always, as you said, it's always bound to who you are and what it is. So, for example, we cannot write expressions according to the data that has been entered to this.
Yeah.
And you cannot make it locked or unlocked according to the data or according to anything else.
Okay, okay.
Is it true? Or?
So I think what, Murad, I think what you're saying is that you want to have some conditions where this particular record, I can see it, but this other record, and maybe it's not record type based. It's some sort of, so it's something other than the record type, like department, like, I don't know, type of position, who the hiring manager is, whatever. There's something about the data that makes us want to, there's something conditional that we want to say, okay, sometimes the user sees it in these cases, but in other cases they don't. But it's on a sort of per record basis.
For more information on Salesforce.com training and certification, please visit www.salesforce.com/training.